From Mark Harmon being an important character on the show to where the franchise is headed next, here's why NCIS should have ended with Mark Harmon's exit. With season 20, everyone's missing a fan-favorite character. At the end of the last season, Mark Harmon's character, played by Leroy Jethro Gibbs, is a supervisory special agent who sadly said goodbye to the agency by retiring to Alaska. Harmon was one of the only 2 original cast members to stay with the show for all 19 seasons, and he was the show's main character, so him leaving the show was a big deal. Gibbs first appeared in the backdoor pilot for NCIS as part of the JAG show in 2003, and since then, he's been in every season. Without Harmon on the show changed a lot to try to fill the gap left by the senior agent. But it still doesn't feel the same. Even though the other characters still carry the torch, this season still feels like it's missing something important. When a show's been on the air for a long time, it'll change, but not always for the better. So with such a big change for such a well-known and popular show, it makes you wonder, should the show have ended when Gibbs left? Let's start with how the foundation of NCIS was defined when Gibbs left. On NCIS, the most important characters were always the special agents. Crime procedurals like NCIS and CSI have always had casts that change and grow, but they've always relied on a strong foundation from a few core members. Since each episode's self-contained, there aren't many villains who show up more than once.
What I did, man.
Well, you should be. If you testify, you could actually help James. How are you going to feel, Gibbs, if you're the reason that he goes free?
This makes the bad guys much less memorable. This puts even more pressure on a strong group of main characters who help keep the show interesting and consistent over many seasons. Gibb has been a part of the show since the beginning and has helped keep the show true to itself. He wasn't the only agent on NCIS, but he was the one who made this version of the show so interesting. As the senior agent in charge of the other agents, he was the calm and fair leader of the group. He had a gruff, unreadable exterior atop a loyal and virtuous heart. Gibbs was the leader of the rest of the team. He pushed everyone to do their best by showing them how to do the job and was actually one of the most important characters in the series. Following Harmon's exit,
But why did you choose to tell me?
Because you wanted the truth.
Yeah, but most people don't offer it up quite so generously.
the only character to be credited in every episode so far is Ducky. Even though he's a well-liked part of the show, he wasn't one of its main points. His role as a doctor kept him out of much of the action and investigation that thrilled us for much of each episode. Because he wasn't in the middle of most plots, he couldn't fill the spot left by a character like Gibbs. Gibbs was always there, whether he was in action on the ground or slapping McGee on the head in the office. He was a part of most interactions and storylines in every episode. Even as the special agents around him changed from season to season, Gibbs remained the center around which they all moved. Let's face it, the show wouldn't be the same without him. Gibbs was the leader who set the tone of the flagship series. One thing that makes the NCIS franchise stand out is how different the characters are in each spin-off series. In each version of NCIS, certain people set the tone, and in the first series, that person was Jethro Gibbs. Since NCIS LA is set in Los Angeles, suspects are questioned in a boathouse, and the team's based in an open-air Spanish-style building. One of the main characters is a former LAPD liaison. Compared to the original, their characters are more laid-back and casual, just like people from California. This NCIS is based out of Washington, D.C., a setting paramount to the national safety these agents are meant to protect. Jethro Gibbs led that team for 20 years, and he was the only character on the show who really embodied everything that made the original NCIS different from its spin-offs. Not to mention, he was also a fan favorite. Gibbs's character was the textbook example of an NCIS agent, or at least the perfect example for us to relate to. He was very good at his job, but didn't have much time for bureaucratic nonsense.
You might want to talk about that.
No, you thought right. Parker James' lawyer, Renfro. He charges 6 figures for a reason. Guy's a pit bull.
And was kind to his team, but had high standards for them and didn't show much weakness. He had a complex, tragic past, but forged ahead to ensure justice was attained. Gibbs's many layers and depths set the tone for the complex, interesting story arcs and relationships. He was not only the team's leader, but also the main character of the whole series. That's why it only made sense for the show to end after he left. While the show's producers attempted to fill the void left by Gibbs's departure with a new character, it was clear that the show show just wasn't the same without him. But there were other reasons too why it should have ended then. NCIS had already been on for 20 years, and many people thought it was time for the show to end. They thought the show had worsened over the years, and that Mark Harmon's departure was the perfect chance to end it on a high note. Everyone wanted NCIS to end because, among other things, they thought the show was getting boring. Many of the cases the team worked on seemed like they had already been solved. The show's pattern of introducing a new case, investigating it, and solving it was no longer surprising or exciting to fans. They also thought that the show had lost its soul. The relationship between the characters had become boring and predictable, and the show's attempts to shake things up didn't work. People missed the banter between Gibbs and his team. Also, the weird relationships between characters like Abby and McGee, and the father-son relationship between Gibbs and Tony. Everyone also thought the show had worsened over the past few years. The writing had gotten lazy and boring.
What are you doing here?
I could ask you the same question.
This is about the article, and you're looking for a retraction. You can forget about it.
No. No, you did good work on it. You did good work on all your articles.
And the cases weren't as interesting or exciting as they used to be. Mostly, I thought the show was getting worse because its ratings were declining and many longtime viewers were leaving. This brings me to the next important question. Where will the NCIS franchise go? Of course, even with Gibbs gone, there might still be some redeemable storylines and more spin-offs to explore. Even though Gibbs was perhaps the most important member of the DC-based team, it's important to remember he wasn't the only one. It would be unfair to characters like Timothy McGee, who's been a regular on the show since its second season and is played by Sean Murray. People might want to know how Nick Torres' career will go from here, but even if Gibbs' retirement brought the end of NCIS, fans will still be able to see the characters in other places. The world of NCIS is much bigger than just the DC base, as shown by the spin-offs. After its 14th season, NCIS LA is ending, leaving NCIS fans with an even bigger hole. But the solution isn't to try to force a show to be something it can't be anymore. Gibbs was the most important, memorable, and irreplaceable character on NCIS. Without him, the show would be very different. The sometimes grumpy but always dependable lead agent was the group's backbone.
I'm the only person that heard him confess. I don't take the stand. This guy will walk.
She thinks she can get a conviction even without you.
She thinks.
His leaving has left a hole that makes the series feel like an entirely different show. If Jethro Gibbs wasn't in charge of NCIS, it might also be time to end that show. That's all on why NCIS should have ended with Mark Harmon's exit.